One of the basic principles in closing the distance is to not retreat while your opponent is attacking. This is exemplified here in the defense against the jab. Malapit will execute a simultaneous attack while he is defending. His opponent executes a left jab. Malapit parries the jab and with his right hand scoops the punch slightly outwards while leaning his body back. This lean not only helps move his body away from the jab, but also helps him thrust his hips forward to launch a right knee into his opponent's ribs. Again, notice the parry. Notice how his wrist turns and hooks his opponent's jab outwards. Notice how he leans back slightly. Notice how his lean helps him execute a knee strike. And notice how his left hand stays on guard at all times. In defending against the hook, Malapit will again execute a simultaneous attack while defending. His opponent executes a left hook. Malapit raises his hand to protect his chin and to block the left hook. His hand comes forward. This not only checks the distance of his opponent, but raises his left shoulder to protect his left chin. He leans back slightly and at the same time launches a right knee. Timing is the key to this attack. Again, Malapit does not retreat in stance. Notice how he raises his right hand close to his chin for protection. Notice how his left hand comes forward. Notice how his opponent's body is open for the right knee. Lastly, notice the angle of Malapit's knee. It does not come straight up, but instead in a diagonal angle. In defending against the uppercut, Malapit will pivot his body to the left. He uses his left hand to stop the upward direction of his opponent's punch. He places his right hand over his opponent's head and pulls his opponent's head downward into his right knee. Notice how he places his right hand over the back of his opponent's head. Notice how his left hand stops the uppercut directly and with his wrist slightly hooked. Notice how he blocks and pivots away at the same time, allowing his right knee to come directly to his opponent's head. In defending against the knee, Malapit will step towards his opponent at the same time. While his opponent executes a right knee, Malapit will step forward and lift a right knee at the same time, but instead use his inside shin to block his opponent's knee attack. Because his movement is shorter, he can time his shin to meet the thigh of his opponent's knee attack. Notice how he steps into the attack. Notice where his shin makes contact. Notice how his hands land directly inside his opponent's shoulder. This allows him to be ready to lock up his opponent for control or to execute another strike of his own. In defending against a low kick, Malapit wants to move in and counterattack as quickly as possible. As his opponent kicks, Malapit brings his lower leg backwards, only folding it at its knee. The block is against the outer tip of the shin, or his opponent may kick the top of his knee. Because he doesn't raise his thigh, he's able to quickly step forward again and quickly launch a right knee. Notice how little he steps back. Notice how his thigh is not raised. Notice how quickly he can step forward. Notice how he can use that forward momentum to launch a knee. And notice how his body leans back and his hands are still high and on guard. Defending against the mid-kick, Malapit will execute a cross-leg block with his right leg while trapping his opponent's leg with his left hand. As his opponent kicks, he raises his right shin and thwarts the kick. When his opponent is stopped, Malapit also brings his left hand down and scoops his opponent's leg, trapping it to further counterattack. Notice how high he raises his leg for the cross block. The knee must come high to defend against the kick. Notice how his left hand moves at the same time to grab his opponent's kick. Notice how his right hand is still on guard. And notice how close he is into his opponent's attack, and now he has closed the distance. In defending against the high kick, Malapet will keep his hands held high on his on-guard position. He lets the kick come towards his hands, and in this case, the opponent's right kick comes towards the left side of his head. He keeps his hands held high. He times his right hand to come underneath the kick and trap his opponent's leg between his left forearm and right hand. Notice how his right arm comes underneath, but not too low, just enough to come underneath the kick. Notice how the right hand is curved at the wrist to catch and trap the opponent's kick. Notice how he rotates his body ever so slightly to the left. Using a part of the combination before, a defending against a low kick, Malapet will show a series of moves that allows him to close the gap and gain control over his opponent. Malapet launches a left push kick. Notice how he takes a small step in with his right leg as he executes the left push kick. The push kick stops his opponent from moving in too close. His opponent low kicks, to which Malapet blocks by just folding his leg at the knee. He folds his left leg back and forward again as he steps in to execute a right knee. Now his right knee does not chamber back, but instead stays forward. As he lands, he puts his right hand on his opponent's neck. Now watch him pull and pivot his left leg back while pulling and gaining control of his opponent. Watch the pivot closely. By controlling his opponent, he keeps him off balance, stays away from the center line attack, and puts himself off angle, ready to strike. One of the principles in the clinch position is to control your opponent by keeping him off balance and staying out of his center line of attack. The key to keeping him off balance and maintaining control is to also put yourself in an offensive stance after you have controlled your opponent. In the clinch position, Malapet has his hands inside his opponent's arms. He stands evenly with his opponent. His hands are behind his neck. His elbows are slightly outward. He steps back slightly and then pulls his right foot back while pivoting his body. As he does so, his opponent is pulled down and forward. He twists his body slightly. Notice how high his hands are. They are slightly above the neck and on the back of his opponent's head. This allows him to pull his opponent's head forward. Notice as he pivots, his left elbow rises and his opponent's arm and shoulders are slightly pulled upwards as he pulls him to the right. As you can see after his pivot, his right leg is perfectly in position to execute a knee strike. In this offensive control of the neck, Malapet is in the inside position. Being in this position where both of his arms are inside his opponent gives him better control and leverage. As you can see, his hands are on the back of his opponent's head and not on the base of the neck. In one decisive move, he pulls his opponent's head down and forward while stepping back with his right foot. The step back gives him the momentum to bring his opponent's head down. Once in this position, he is in perfect position to execute a knee strike. The lower he pulls down, the closer he can knee his opponent's face. Notice how close his face is to his opponent and how his chin is still tucked in for protection. Again, notice the grab. It's on the back of his opponent's head, not at the base of the neck. From the inside position again, Malapet stands evenly with his opponent. In a quick step forward with his left leg, he positions his left knee inside his opponent's thigh. He pulls while raising his left elbow and raising his opponent off balance slightly. He pulled towards his right and pivots with his right leg backwards. The movement is quick and decisive. Notice how he steps into the throw. Notice the twist in his body. Again, the left elbow raises while twisting. Notice how close he keeps his head towards his opponent. And again, his left leg goes quickly into his opponent's inner thigh. Here he's using one arm to show you what actually happens with his left hand. Again, his left leg steps in towards his opponent's thigh and twists him over. In this throw, Malapet is defending against a knee. Locked in the clench position, his opponent tries to knee. Malapet steps in with his left knee against his opponent's standing leg and twists the same direction of the knee. He throws his opponent while he is executing a knee strike. The opponent is thrown in mid-execution of his technique. Here he's showing you the timing on the knee. His leg rises and twists at the same time. Notice how he raises his leg and twists his body. As he twists the same direction as his opponent is kneeing. In the clenched position, when your arms are in the inside grab, step back with your right foot and push your arms forward. This force allows you to break the opponent's grab. The right arm is simultaneously drawn and cocked back with a slight bend as you step backwards. This immediately puts you in a position ready to elbow strike. The movement must be done quickly, for the sudden action and surprise will break your opponent's grab. There are several points to note here. Notice that Malapet is stepping back, not trying to push his opponent back. Notice his left arm uses a little bit of leverage from his forearm while straightening his arm and still locking his opponent's neck. Notice as he steps, his right arm is immediately ready to elbow strike. Quickness is the key. In this position here, his opponent has let go of one arm to expose the actual technique that Malapet is executing. Here, Malapet is showing how he can control his opponent's grab with the use of his shoulders. He stands evenly with his opponent and is evenly balanced. He raises his shoulder high and twists his hips and shoulders. This allows him to break the opponent's grip. This action will be one of the fundamental basics in throwing, releasing, and controlling your opponent. His arms are down to show you how he twists and maneuvers his body. Again, his opponent has to release one side of his grip to give you a better view on how his shoulder rotates. Take note the height of his shoulder, and also take note the twist in his body. Using the same shoulder-neck control as seen earlier, this time Malapet will show you the use and application. Standing evenly with his opponent, he grabs his opponent's neck. Using the same shoulder roll, he raises his shoulder, pulls it, and twists at the same time. Also at the same time, he is pivoting his legs with a small, slight step and then pivoting off his left foot. The pivot helps his body motion as he pulls his opponent. Lastly, he pulls his opponent down, not straight across. Watch closely these methods as he breaks it down for you. The shoulders raise, the grip, the shoulder tuck, again the pulling downward action, the small step sideways, and then the pivot. Using leverage with his arm, shoulders, legs, he easily pulls his opponent down for a Muay Thai throw. Here's a close-up showing his feet and footwork in action. the small step, and the pivot off the left foot. The pivot and the throw happen simultaneously. Step, pivot, throw. This throw is a fast and quick body throw. Malapet stands evenly with his opponent. He grabs his waist. Then notice how he places his right knee onto the thigh of his opponent. The knee position gives him the slight leverage needed to throw his opponent. The knee is placed on the outside of the thigh, and it leverages him for his opponent's fall as he twists and turns his body. Again, watch closely and notice where he places his right knee against the outside of his opponent's thigh. This technique may seem complicated at first, but breaking this down, you can see how this technique flows from one point to another. Your opponent has the inside grip. Stand evenly balanced and then raise your shoulder. The quick and sudden move raises your opponent's arm and then push his arm over your head. Move your head so slightly so that your opponent's arm can pass over it. Now trap your opponent's arm on the other side of your head and neck. Now your opponent's arm is trapped, giving him no more control of your neck and nothing to strike with. Step back and execute a knee strike. The important points to remember here is to execute this technique smoothly and quickly. Although it's broken down for you, the technique must flow. Remember the raising of the shoulder, the push of your opponent's arm while letting his arm slip over your head. Notice that the pushing of his opponent's arm is across and not up in the air. Notice the grip is so tight that his opponent's arm is trapped. Notice how close Malapet keeps his head resting on his opponent's shoulder. Notice the position ready for the knee strike. You may notice from the clinch position how close they place their heads on each other's shoulders. This protects your head from any elbows or any short punches while in this position. In this position, Malapet and his opponent has one grip on the inside and the other arm on the outside. From this position, Malapet raises his inside grip, raising his arm high. He's able to slip his arm over his opponent's arm and tuck it in to lock his opponent's arm. He steps back and raises his knee to strike a knee to the body. Take note how high he raises his arm. Bringing his arm around, he tucks it underneath his opponent's arm, trapping his opponent's arm so he can no longer move. Notice how he steps back before executing the knee strike. As he traps his opponent's arm, he raises it high to lock his opponent's arm against his armpit. Notice as he steps back, he pulls his opponent's body forward. Both Malapet and his opponent have an underhook and overhook hold. Malapet releases the overhooking arm and quickly pulls his own head back and steps back with his right leg. He then pulls his opponent's inner forearm down to either weaken the grip or cause him to release the grip. With the opening created, Malapet quickly delivers a straight elbow strike. Again, notice that as Malapet delivers the elbow, his other hand still maintains the grip on his opponent's neck. From here, he can pull the opponent's head into his elbow strike for added power. Speed is important in this movement. Throughout all the techniques, always make note where Malapet places his hand on his opponent's head. Both fighters are again in the overhook, underhook position. To deliver a knee, Malapet releases his overhooking hand and moves it towards the opposite side of his opponent's head. He then grips his opponent's head to jerk it down for a knee strike. In order to facilitate the movement, once Malapet's hand is released, his leg on the same side must simultaneously move in an outward circular motion so that his body will be in position to deliver a knee strike. Notice that after Malapet's leg circles out, it ends up in a rear-legged position to deliver a rear-legged knee strike. Notice as Malapet's hands travels to the other side of his opponent's head, it is placed above the underhook side grip that was already in place. Again, from the overhook, underhook position, Malapet places his underhook side hand under his opponent's armpit. With his overhook side, Malapet grabs his opponent within a deep grip that reaches around his opponent's head towards the area around the opposite side ear. Malapet pulls his opponent in a circular motion, while the hand under his armpit pushes up and circular in the same direction as the pull. Power is generated from the hips and shoulders. Notice Malapet keeps his stance upright with his hips in as he turns his body during the pull. Notice the hand placement under the armpit. The thumb is on the front side, while the other four fingers are on the back side of the armpit. From the underhook-overhook position, the opponent throws a knee at Malapet. To counter, Malapet pushes his opponent away using both hands to push out around his opponent's bottom chin. Notice that as soon as his opponent raises his knee, Malapet also raises his knee so that it comes up underneath the opponent's thigh to knock him off balance. Here's another technique used to counter the opponent's knee strikes from the underhook-overhook position. As the opponent strikes with his knee, Malapet raises his underhook arm high at the elbow, which pushes his opponent's arm up above the center of gravity. At the same time, Malapet raises his knee to strike the opponent beneath his thigh. Simultaneously, Malapet tilts his body sideways while pivoting on the other foot in a circular motion. When all the actions are performed together, the opponent is thrown completely off balance. The opponent grabs Malapet with both arms under. To counter, Malapet places one foot behind his opponent's knee and pushes out in a downward angle. One hand bridges the opponent's neck to keep his head down and towards the side of the pushing leg. The other hand digs underneath the opponent's arm to secure an underhook position. Once both hands are in place to keep the opponent's head low, Malapet releases the pushing leg, brings it back, and delivers a knee strike. Notice Malapet brings up both hands to guard against the initial attack before executing his technique. As the opponent attempts to grab Malapet with both arms under, Malapet counters with a throw. He wraps both arms around the opponent. One hand secures a grip under the opponent's armpit. The other hand is placed firmly behind the opponent's shoulder blade. To execute the throw, Malapet twists his body, pushes up on the armpit, and down on the shoulder blade, in a steering wheel fashion. Notice Malapet's stance is square when delivering this technique. While Malapet has the advantage by having both arms on the inside of the Thai clinch, the opponent shoots one hand for the underhook position. To counter, Malapet circles his hands clockwise to parry the opponent's shooting arm out and wide. With the arm out and wide, an opening is created for Malapet to deliver a knee strike. Notice Malapet moves his hips back sufficiently to deliver a powerful knee strike. Here, Malapet initially attacks by grabbing his opponent's waist with both hands under. His opponent attempts to break the hold by digging one hand inside. Malapet immediately locks his opponent's arm by wrapping it around tight to his opponent's body. The lock is made tighter as Malapet grabs the bottom of his own bicep on the opposite arm. The forearm of this opposite arm is placed across the outside of the opponent's head, with the hands pushing down on the opponent's neck. Malapet finally delivers a knee to the opponent's face. Notice Malapet's inside leg steps back a little in a circular motion to set up a knee strike. Malapet demonstrates how to take down an opponent by grabbing around the waist, lifting, twisting, and throwing. The throw is made easier as Malapet places his hips below the opponent's hips. To defend against such a throw, Malapet 1. Places his lower leg across the thigh of his opponent. Notice the foot hooks beneath the opponent's thigh to secure this position. Push out with this leg every time you feel the opponent lifting. 2. The arm on the same side is wrapped tightly across the opponent's neck. 3. The opponent's other arm pushes off at the opponent's hip to prevent him from getting his hips underneath Malapet's hips. At the same time, the free leg is used to maintain balance and may be sprung up and down like a pogo stick, depending on how the opponent attempts to throw. When all the elements are in place, the opponent is unable to throw from this position. Here the opponent attempts to wrap both of his arms around Malapet's arms. Malapet shows the proper way to throw his opponent from this position. Notice Malapet's palms are open and pointed vertically up prior to executing this throw. Malapet then places his hips into his opponent's, lifts, twists, and throws. Malapet and his opponent has each other's head in a deep underhook, overhook type lock. The opponent has his elbow adjacent to Malapet's head. This allows Malapet to push the elbow up and free his head. Malapet pivots one leg out in a circular motion. From the side, Malapet secures a head and arm lock before delivering a knee strike to the opponent's chest. Malapet's opponent has him in a head and arm lock. Here the lock is not yet deep and Malapet has his elbow out next to the opponent's face. The opponent's elbow is also adjacent to Malapet's head. Malapet uses the elbow and forearm of the trapped arm to bridge against the opponent's head, while his free arm pushes up on his opponent's elbow to release the lock. The outer hand is then placed around the opponent's tricep area, while the inner hand presses down on the opponent's neck to lock him in a crouching position. Notice Malapet brings his inner leg back before delivering a knee strike to the opponent's head. Malapet's opponent has him in a head and arm lock. This time the lock is deep and Malapet's entire arm is trapped. Here Malapet has to swing his arm powerfully in a circular motion in the direction of his opponent's head. Malapet must also move his body by pivoting his outer leg and moving the inner leg out in a circular motion. Notice that once the arm is swung around, it is placed on top and across the trapped arm, pushing the opponent's head down. Malapet then strikes his opponent with the knee that is closest to the head. However, either knee could be used depending on your balance. Here, Malapet takes his opponent into the tight head and arm lock position. To deliver a knee strike, Malapet maintains a tight lock on top, but moves his hips and legs away from his opponent. With the space created, Malapet delivers a knee strike to the opponent's kidneys. Notice with Malapet, the knee is delivered with the rear leg. This technique demonstrates a takedown from the head and arm lock position. Malapet secures the head and arm lock. He then steps behind his opponent and trips him with the stepping leg. Notice that when Malapet stepped in with the tripping leg, the other leg stays in place. Depending on his balance, Malapet may also step out with the other leg during the takedown. The takedown is made more effective as Malapet also uses the head and arm lock to throw the opponent down at the same time. From the head-arm lock position, Malapet quickly spins around and grabs his opponent's waist from behind. From this position, Malapet can lift and throw his opponent to the ground. In the famous standard Muay Thai clinch, or simply known as the Thai clinch, the person who has the hold from the inside has the advantage in controlling his opponent's head and neck. Pummeling is the act of swimming your arms inside so that you will be in the position of advantage. As the opponent tries to dig or swim for the inside position, Malapet counters by circling his hands inward to parry the opponent's swim and delivers a diagonal elbow to the face. Malapet may also create more distance after the parry by pushing his opponent and stepping back with one leg to deliver a powerful long-range elbow. As the opponent tries to swim his arms inside for the position of advantage, Malapet counters with a throw. Malapet grabs his opponent deep with one hand and pulls his opponent down in a circular motion. The other hand helps take the opponent down by bridging up on the opponent's other arm and pushing like a steering wheel in the same direction as the pull. You may have seen this Thai clinch training before, where each fighter takes turn alternating the swim of each arm into the inside position to grab the opponent's head. Malapit shows a more effective grab by grabbing deeper into the opponent's head. Notice his hand sometimes almost reaches his opponent's ear. In fact, you may even grab the opponent's opposite ear when performing this technique. Although one may grab the back of the opponent's neck during training, greater control is achieved by grabbing the back of the opponent's head. One may also jerk the opponent's head down for more effect. Remember, the main goal is to control the opponent's head so one can make him more susceptible to knee strikes. Here the opponent charges in and secures a body lock around Malapit's waist. Notice the opponent also closes in with his knees between Malapit's legs. To avoid a takedown by his opponent, Malapit spins one of his legs behind his opponent as he were throwing a roundhouse kick. This motion forces his opponent to ground so that Malapit ends up in the superior mount position. Notice that one of Malapit's hands clings onto the back of his opponent's head during the fall. Make sure you use your forward momentum and do not lean back while performing this technique. When kneeing a taller opponent from the clinch, good targets to aim for are his inner thigh and outer thighs. This will weaken the muscles in his legs. Here Malapit has his opponent in a body lock while alternating his left and right knee strikes to the inner and outer thighs. Here, the taller opponent tries to grab Malapit in a Thai clinch to deliver a knee. Malapit attacks first by grabbing his opponent's ribs below the armpit to push him out. At the same time, Malapit delivers a knee strike to the opponent's inner thigh to knock him off balance. Notice Malapit delivers the knee strike with his opposite leg. Here, the taller opponent tries to pull Malapit's head down from the Thai clinch position. Malapit counters by placing one hand behind the back of his opponent's head, right above the neck. To brush the opponent off balance, Malapit drives his arm in a circular motion while turning his body in the same direction. Notice when Malapit turns his body, the leg on the same side as his driving arm stays in place and pivots. The other leg steps back in a dragging circular motion. This motion gives more power to the driving arm. While fighting for the superior clinching position, the taller opponent puts Malapit in a head and arm lock. To counter, Malapit does the following. On the same side as the lock, Malapit first hooks his foot behind the opponent's knee and pushes his leg out. Notice the opponent lowers his body when a leg is pushed out. At the same time, Malapit forces his trapped arm around his opponent's head, similar to the position used in a guillotine choke. The once trapped arm is then pushed forward underneath the opponent's armpit, where it is used to flip the opponent over on his back. Notice that prior to flipping the opponent over, Malapet delivers a knee strike to weaken him. Let's take a look from the opposite side while all this is going on. From this side, Malapet simply holds onto his opponent's tricep area, which is released when flipping the opponent over onto his back.